Ooh, wasabi guys, welcome back to another 5 underrated commander cards video, a series that I'm starting to do once a month, where I just go over 5 lesser known commanders. I think these commanders are all pretty solid. They either do something very unique, or they just offer you something that is going to be reliable in a commander setting. They offer you some kind of resource. But before I get into the video, first I would like to remind you that most of you who are watching right now are not actually subscribed to the channel, so please, I would really appreciate it if you took a second to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. First commander option here is Chaisei, Heart of Oceans. From Betrayers of Kamigawa, 4-mana blue legendary spirit, a 4/4 flyer. At the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice Chaisei, Heart of Oceans, unless you remove a counter from a permanent you control. Now this is such an unusual commander option because we don't see anything else like it. Removing counters is kind of the opposite of what you want to do in most strategies, because more counters means, well, more +1/+1 counters for your creatures to attack with, more loyalty counters on your planeswalkers so that you can use their other abilities. Why on earth would you want to get rid of counters on your permanents? Well, there are certain counters that are not beneficial, such as the lore counters on your saga cards. Once you add your 3rd lore counter or your 4th lore counter, whatever the last lore counter is, that saga goes away. So to prevent this from happening, to prevent you from losing your sagas too early, you're able to remove those lore counters with Chaisei. Now there are a few pretty decent saga cards in here. I don't think they're necessarily overpowered, but the one that really stands out here, of course, is Kiora Best's The Sea God, 7-mana saga. The first one is you create an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token with hexproof. So if you wanted to, realistically, depending on which one you played first, either Chaisei or this card, you could continue to get the same 8/8 blue Kraken creature token with hexproof, or you could get the second lore counter again to tap all non-land permanents target opponent controls and effectively lock them down if you're able to continuously do that. Or you can get the third one over and over again. You gain control of target permanent and opponent controls and untap it. To be honest, if you're able to do any of those, if you're able to get any of those lore counters more than just once in a game, I think that's incredibly strong. Now, the counters that you get off of something like Glenelendra for Persist, you don't want those -1/-1 counters, because it means that once you use her ability a second time, she won't come back. So if you remove those -1/-1 counters with her, you'll be able to keep her out there and counter much more. Now, something else that you can take advantage of is age counters off of something like Mystic Remora. Now, it doesn't say it on the card itself, but cumulative upkeep means that each one of your upkeeps you get an age counter, and then you pay mana equal to the number of age counters that you have. So if you're able to constantly remove those age counters, you're not going to have to pay that much mana to keep something like Mystic Remora around. Also, it's a very beneficial thing if you have cards like Thing in the Ice, where again, these counters are not beneficial. You actually want to get rid of them sooner. So if you're able to speed that process up and then you get your Awoken Horror, I think that is a really cool synergy. The next commander option here is Manichi, the Fever Dream. 3-mana red legendary spirit, a 1/2 with an activated ability of 2 mana. Switch each creature's power and toughness until end of turn. This is such an unusual card, and it really just speaks to the underrated strength of the Kamigawa block. You have so many weird legendary creatures, which back then probably didn't seem that great, which is why a lot of people have a negative opinion about the Kamigawa block. Just not a ton of value, but you do get some of the most interesting commander options ever. And I think Manichi is a pretty underrated one. What this is really beneficial for is taking advantage of double strike creatures in red that have only like 1 power, they have a larger toughness, and that was sort of the card's way of balancing that. By giving that creature double strike, it would have a lower power, meaning you would want to throw on something like equipment to make that double strike even more impactful. But there are a ton of double strike creatures with low power and high toughness that you can swap the power and toughness for and make that double strike even deadlier, like Prophetic Flamespeaker. There's Two-Headed Cerberus. And how you would want to win with this kind of deck is making those creatures unblockable, using creatures like Goblin Tunneler and Pathmaker Initiate, so that creatures with power 2 or less are unblockable. Most of those double strike creatures, and we even have the newest one here, Efreet Flame Painter, they're double strike creatures with only 1 power, so you can easily make them unblockable in red. And then it just takes 2 more mana and you swap their power and toughness, and suddenly you're hitting your opponents for a lot more damage, like a lot more, because of that double strike. This is made even funnier because we have equipment that will assist you in giving your creatures a higher toughness, like Slagworm Armor. We have a quarter shield, just so that once you flip their power and toughness, that double strike damage is going to be even greater. Now, a lot of underrated commanders, in my opinion, they don't have a straightforward, surefire way of winning the game outside of combat. That'd be like the one criticism for them. But in Red, you do have ways of making this strategy even more effective. If you're able to add to your damage from your red sources using something like Torbran, or use something like a Fiery Emancipation, you will have even more damage. It'll be so much easier to kill off your opponents with a lot of these creatures that maybe only originally had one power and double strike. And then we have Riki, the History of Kamigawa. I know, it's the third card from the Kamigawa block that you're going to see in this video, but again, it just goes to the strength, the underrated strength of this block. You have some really solid commander options in here. And Riki is a 3 mana, green, legendary human shaman, a 1/2. Whenever you play a legendary spell, you draw a card. That's it, that's the strategy. You just want to play your legendary cards. There is a ton of legendary creatures, legendary artifacts, legendary enchantments, and of course planeswalkers to choose from so that it'll make it even easier for you to draw your cards. Again, this is an underrated commander because there's not a straightforward way to win. It's just, you're playing mono green, you're going to be playing a lot of really powerful creatures that are legendary. The fact that you're able to keep filling your hand each time you play one of these means you're going to be a little bit ahead of your opponents who have to spend their resources, who in order to get ahead in the game, they're going to have to empty their hand a little bit. That is the strength of Reki here. You have Kodama of the East Tree is a really good legendary creature that I think works well with this one, because you're also able to reward yourself for drawing cards by cheating it to play other cards. We just got a really good legendary creature in Kaldheim called Toski, Bearer of Secrets. So you deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card, making a card draw engine in green just even more powerful, because you're just going to keep your hand full and you're going to have more to play with. And of course, you can take advantage of legendary synergies using something like a Hero's Podium. So each legendary creature gets +1/+1 for each other legendary creature we control, and you can pay X and tap it to look at the top X cards of your library. You reveal a legendary creature card from among them and put it into your hand and the rest on the bottom. Also, we have Blackblade Reforged, so that's only going to cost 3 to equip to any of your creatures, and you're just going to benefit from having more legendaries altogether. The next one we have here is Jedi Master of the Review. 2 mana black and red, 1/1 legendary human shaman. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, you put a +1/+1 counter on Juri, and when Juri dies, it deals damage to its power to any target. So this right away is already something that's strong in Commander, sacrifice, and +1/+1 counters. All you're really doing here is combining those strategies into red and black. You would want to benefit off of sacrifice outlets like Viscerseer and Goblin Bombardment that we have in red and black. Just cheap ways of sacrificing creatures. You can do this consistently with these cards, because that's what you want to do and you want to do it often. And you need good creatures to sacrifice, and you need them to come back, or you need ways of getting more creatures, so you need something like a Reassembling Skeleton or a Panavulamog. This is really important to the strategy because you need consistent fodder. The more fodder that you have, the more +1/+1 counters you're going to have. And you also want ways of benefiting from sacrificing creatures outside of just getting more +1/+1 counters on Juri. So use Mayhem Devil, use Judith the Scourge Diva. These are 2 really good black and red cards that will benefit you for sacrificing your own creatures. You get to deal damage, and Mayhem Devil is really the star of the show in a lot of these decks anyway, because you also benefit from your opponent sacrificing whatever they want to sacrifice. It could be a land. It's going to deal 1 damage to whoever you want to deal damage to, or whatever you want to deal damage to. The cool thing about this commander is that you can fling it. You are playing the colors for fling, so you can play something like Fling, you could play something like Soul's Fire, you could play something like Thud. The whole point of the deck is to just take our commander's power and then use that to just win easily. Doesn't have to be commander damage always, but the damage we're going to be dealing is usually substantial. And then the last card here is Grum Gully the Generous. As a commander option, we just get another very underrated mechanic. Very subtle, you know, we don't get over the top mechanics here that just win you the game outright, but very similar to Chaisei, the first card I showed you, Grum Gully does work well with Persist. In fact, I think that's one of the stronger synergies here, is being able to take advantage of Persist creatures like Woodfall Primus and something like Thunderblast, because if they come back with -1/-1 counters, they will also enter with an additional +1/+1 counter. And with Grum Gully out there, the benefit of that is that they pretty much cancel each other out. you cannot have a creature with both +1/+1 counters and -1/-1 counters on it at the same time. So those persist creatures, if you kill them off, if you have a sack outlet like a Goblin Bombardment, you'll be able to just loop that infinitely and then easily kill off your opponents. But even outside of that, there are some pretty solid +1/+1 counter synergies. We have Evolution Sage, of course. So if you have a land enter the battlefield, you get to proliferate, which is good because you're going to have a lot of creatures with +1/+1 counters on them, giving you a variety of options. You also have +1/+1 counter synergies with a card like Rishkar Pima Renegade. This results in you having more green mana to fool around with, and if you're looking for card draw with +1/+1 counter synergies, you're not really going to be looking far. We have Inspiring Call and Armorcraft Judge, both giving us card draw equal to the number of creatures we control with +1/+1 counters on them. And while we're on the topic of underrated commander options, allow me to introduce you to an underrated sack outlet, Thermopod. You sacrifice a creature and you add 1 red to your pool. So you get a free sack outlet here that will also loop infinitely with any persist creature and Grum Gully, giving you infinite red mana. I think it's cool because not a lot of sack outlets are in red and green. So that is a huge part of that strategy and you absolutely need it. And outside of this, of course, if you don't have any way of sacrificing with Goblin Bombardment and winning that way, you could of course go the Impact Tremors and Perforos God of the Forge route with Grum Gully. If you're able to infinitely kill off and bring back your creatures with Persist, you will just win the game right then and there. So anyway, let me know what you think about these 5 underrated commander cards options. Which one was your favorite? Do you have any recommendations for underrated commander cards yourself? Let me know in the comment section below. Void here signing off. Have a wonderful day.